In the past 20 years, the number of people living with eating disorders across the world has doubled. Over 10,000 people every year lose their lives as a direct result of an eating disorder. The abnormally high mortality rate for eating disorders can often be a direct result of public misconceptions. There's a widely accepted stigma that these disorders are a result of personal choices rather than involuntary factors. As a result of this stigma and its additional implications, most people in need of professional help never actively pursue it. One of the most essential tasks of this generation will be educating the public on what it means to have an eating disorder and dissolving the misconceptions that have plagued our collective understanding for so long. National Eating Disorders Awareness Week is a campaign that strives to promote awareness and resources for individuals and families affected by eating disorders. One of our primary goals as members of Active Minds is to spread awareness on the intricacies of mental health. Active Minds is a national nonprofit that aims to connect students with the resources they need to become emotionally conscious and confident. Our SCSU chapter has been tabling across campus this semester, advertising mental health facilities such as counseling and psychological services, the Veterans Resource Center, and other student health services. We can take a moment now to introduce ourselves, our name, major, and briefly why we joined the club. My name is Nick, and I am the co-president of our chapter. I'm a creative writing major freshman, and I joined the club because I feel that teens and young adults going into college arrive here with a hesitancy to focus on their own mental health, and I appreciate that Active Minds works to give that platform a discussion.
My name is Alexis. I'm a co-president of Active Minds. I'm a clinical mental health graduate student, and I joined Active Minds because 5 years ago when I started Active Minds, I really needed a space and to get to know people that understood mental health, people that I could relate to, that wouldn't judge me for my story, and I found that through Active Minds.
Yeah, my name's Phil. I'm a community psychology major. I'm a transfer student, and I guess I just joined Active Minds because I have a mental illness and I want to be able to share my story and just learn more about people and stuff, and even prepare for my career a little more.
Yeah, my name's Anil Otar. I am a freshman in St. Cloud, and my major is in psychology. And I joined Active Minds because I thought it can be something pretty useful to expand outwards, especially towards mental health or anything that's kind of related to that.
And my name is Charlene Hanisch-Tyson. I am the advisor of Active Minds. Active Minds is in our 11th year and going strong. So very privileged to be part of this team.
Absolutely. And we meet every Wednesday at 3:30 in the Columbine rooms on the second floor of Atwood. And we're always looking for new members. If you're interested in mental health awareness or are looking for more information, please feel free to contact us through our school email, activeminds@stcloudstate.edu. Our goal here today is to shine a light on the undiscussed complexities of eating disorders and their common relationship with other mental health concerns. There are two large contributors to the fact that 3 of 4 people with eating disorders do not pursue professional help: stigma and lack of information. Almost half of people with eating disorders do not know where to start looking when it comes to qualified assistance. The National Eating Disorders Association, or NEDA, works to engage the community and connect people with tools, helplines, and other eating disorder resources that they may have not even been aware of. From February 21st to the 27th, NEDA will engage hundreds of communities in advocacy and discussion as part of National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. Their goal is to give platforms to specialists and professionals who can help better connect the public with the reality of eating disorders. One such specialist is with us here today in collaboration with Active Minds to bring attention to eating disorders with a rare and powerful insight. Kelly Doss grew up in Alexandria, Minnesota, and has been living in St. Cloud for the past 12 years. She received her BA degrees in political science and psychology from St. Cloud State University and has a master's degree in politics from the University of Dallas. Along with serving on local and national nonprofit boards over the years, Kelly served as an executive director of a nonprofit that served people with intellectual disabilities in Wilmer up until 2020, when she became the director of development at Central Minnesota Mental Health Center. She has been in recovery from anorexia, self-harm, and depression for over 15 years and ran a peer support group for eating disorders on the SCSU campus for over 5 years. She enjoys volleyball, boxing, making vision boards, and getting tattoos. She has donated her time today to help spread awareness and remove stigmas surrounding eating disorders and mental health, which is a campaign we at Active Minds have been pursuing as well. Kelly, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So to start off our discussion today, we wanted to begin by asking you how you first decided to seek help. Was it a personal decision, something you realized after a discussion with friends or family, or both?
So my eating disorder was full blown my freshman year of college. I do believe I had disordered eating behaviors throughout my teenage years, but once I became out on my own, away from my family, away from everybody I knew, friends, support, it was just got so easy for it to snowball out of control and become full blown anorexia. And then when I came back home my freshman year, obviously my family could tell just physically that there was something wrong. So I was able to go to outpatient. My physician referred me to Central Care here in St. Cloud. And then I actually ended up transferring to St. Cloud State. I was in South Dakota my freshman year, and then I transferred to St. Cloud State. So that obviously made it easier for me to continue with Central Care doing the outpatient. However, it got to the point where it was suggested that I do inpatient. And you have to remember, this was like 20 years ago. Insurance companies were not treating eating disorders the same as like physical disorders. So I was denied that opportunity to have, the structure and support 24 hours a day. So I was just kind of left with the outpatient. So it was like maybe once or twice a week for an hour each time. And there was some small progress with that. But then I went to graduate school, and then I was really far away because I was in Texas. And I feel like that's just when it got to its worst point. And so it was actually became pretty much medically necessary that I go to inpatient. So, and when I was first told, you have to drop out of grad school and go do inpatient, there was a part of me that was relieved. And there was also a part of me that was very scared because this had been entrenched for me for so long. And it was just the way I coped with everything. It's the way I numbed out. It's just how I dealt with life. And I was afraid of it being taken away from me. But I also was very aware too, that if something didn't change, I wasn't going to last much longer. So it was a lot of different things. Obviously, my family said, you need to go get help. And then it got to the point where it maybe wasn't so much of a choice, where my doctor said, well, if you don't go, it might, medical hold was probably the other option and I'd be forced to go. But I did make that choice on my own that, yes, I need to go to inpatient, and dropped out of grad school. But, once I got out, I went back to grad school and was able to continue on. So it was a lot of different factors, but thankfully, even though it's not where it should be, I feel like mental health conditions, as far as eating disorders, are getting much more recognition as, getting closer to that parity with physical health. So it's not there yet, but at least it's a lot better than it was when I was struggling with it. So.
And as you just kind of elaborated on there's very often a direct correlation between eating disorders and other mental health disorders.
Yeah, so my question was in regard to the comorbidity of it. And so how can depression and anxiety affect an eating disorder and vice versa? Do people who struggle with eating disorders often struggle with another mental health issue?
That's a great question. For that first one, how can depression, anxiety affect an eating disorder and vice versa? I think it's really a catch-22. People obviously react to depression and anxiety differently. But I feel like when you're not feeling at your best, it leaves that room for a coping mechanism like an eating disorder to kind of creep in and help you deal with your mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety. But also as you have an eating disorder and as it snowballs and it becomes more severe, obviously your outlook on life, it's not going to be the best. The depression gets worse. There's that hopelessness that sets in. Am I ever going to get better? Is there hope for me? And also too, the anxiety, obviously the rituals and the behaviors are what needed to alleviate that anxiety. And so, yeah, it's really, they feed off of each other. So one doesn't help the other. But I would say as far as the co-occurring or comorbidity, I know I was diagnosed not just with anorexia, but also major depression. And I also did self-harm too. And I found, especially as I went to inpatient, that self-harm was also a very common co-occurring disorder with that. So I've seen self-harm. OCD was another one I've seen a lot. Drugs and alcohol as well. But I would say probably the major ones would be depression, anxiety, self-harm, OCD. And I also noticed a lot of people have PTSD or they're dealing with some sort of trauma. And that's where the eating disorder would help numb out or mask that PTSD or help people deal when they experience PTSD. So there's often trauma in the background of somebody with an eating disorder. So
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think we've definitely seen that isolation has kind of swooped in as another contributing factor in the expansion of these disorders. Especially in the last couple of years, we've seen huge spikes in reported eating disorders. In several parts of the world, we saw eating disorder hospital admissions increase by over 50%.
Yeah, Kelly, I'm wondering, with the pandemic, we've seen a lot of isolation, and eating disorders are disorders that thrive in secrecy. How has the pandemic impacted people with eating disorders?
Yes. To allude back to that isolation, you're right. Eating disorders do happen in secrecy, and it becomes so much easier to isolate because you don't want people to find out about it. But when that's like imposed on you because of a pandemic, it's just so easy for it to escalate and become unchecked. I think not having that social support, and I think for young people especially, if we think about the teenagers that are still in like high school and junior high, they have this set structure of going to school, being around their friends, participating in extracurricular activities. And when the pandemic took that away, I feel like that was a contributing factor to eating disorders increasing, because that was such a disruption to their routine. They didn't have the social interaction that they were so used to. I'm sure that elevated the stress that a lot of young people were feeling. And I also think too, as far as mental health in general, one thing that I've seen in central Minnesota is because of the pandemic and we couldn't do in-person stuff, some people actually doing the virtual telehealth was beneficial for some. I think a majority really the in-person stuff benefits them the most. But there are some people where, whether it was transportation or anxiety of going outside the home, or the telehealth actually was beneficial for them. But again, that's a smaller portion of the population. But yeah, I think just being cut off from social supports and being easier to isolate, it definitely had a negative impact on people's recovery. So.
And with us gradually returning to social settings and our environments hopefully becoming safer for face-to-face interactions, it becomes much more important to know how to react if a friend or family member is going through a battle with an eating disorder. It was reported by the Eating Disorders Coalition that nearly half of all Americans personally know someone with an eating disorder. We were curious to know how you would advise friends or family to best assist or comfort people they know who are struggling. What's the best way to support someone you know with an eating disorder?
I guess from my own personal experience, again, a while ago, I think people just didn't know how to approach people. They could obviously physically see that there was something wrong, but they just didn't know how to start the conversation. So maybe I can do this in forms of do's and don'ts as far as supporting somebody that you know has an eating disorder. As you can see from my example that I just gave, don't ignore the problem because it won't go away on its own. Actually, if you ignore it, it's just going to continue to get worse. So I would say just if you know somebody or somebody's confiding in you, go to a place where you two can be alone. Be very honest with what you're seeing or what you're feeling. Using I statements, I feel, is very important. I have noticed this change in your behavior. I am very concerned for you. Instead of making it to you statements, like, you are worrying me, you're, causing me anxiety and worry, and, trying to make it from your point of view in the I statements. Always just be very honest and try to avoid the oversimplifications, like just eat. You would feel so much better if all you had to do was eat, because it's obviously much more complex than that. The food and the eating, that's the behavior, but there's obviously something going on internally. That's why we call it a mental health condition, is because it really does have to do with the mind. So after you tell the person how you're feeling, what concerns you have, and it's okay to rehearse this stuff ahead of time, because I know it's very a very anxious thing to do, is to approach somebody because you don't know how they're going to react. Some might actually be relieved when you have the conversation with them, and some might push back. They might not even be in a place where they're ready to admit that they have a problem that they can't handle on their own. But I would say always offer that you're there to listen. I've always told people to maybe avoid saying, I know how you feel. I know that was one that it kind of made me upset a little bit. It's like, you can't be in my head. You don't know exactly how this feels. You can say, I can relate, or anything like that. But, and the other thing, this was a big no-no, and can't believe people said this to me, but they would say, I wish I had your problem. And while I get where they were coming from, I'm like, no, you don't want this problem. So just be a good listener. And even if they push back, always let them know that you're there to listen and support. Encourage them to ask for what they need, because obviously we can't read people's minds. So just encourage the open and honest conversation. And of course, the big thing is encourage them to get professional help. I would suggest somebody that specializes in eating disorders. It's not all too common for people to specialize in that, but ask them to do the research or help them do the research to find somebody who actually does specialize in eating disorders. But yeah, I would say just the big thing, don't ignore it, have the conversation, and just encourage them to get professional help. So.
And speaking to exactly what you just said, we wanted to know what kind of professional help and support has proven to be the most effective, and how consistently effective those specific methods of treatment are. What seem to be the best avenues for recovery, and is the path to recovery more personal or universal?
I would say it would be universal, in that I think it's really important to treat the whole person. I think so many people focus on the behavior part of it, because obviously that's what's causing the most harm to their physical health. But I really had to take a look at my self-image, my self-concept, my self-worth, those negative messages that the negative self-talk, I had to combat those. So I think it's universal in that sense, in that it's just not about the behaviors. You really have to look at, like I said, your self-image, your self-concept, and what you really believe about yourself. However, I do believe the path to recovery is very personal. And that's one thing I actually value about my recovery, is because I had to figure out my own way through this, that it's mine. So what works for me maybe not work for somebody else, but through that path of self-discovery, it just made my recovery so much more valuable to me. And I wouldn't trade it for anything, because of that path of self-discovery. But yeah, I think in the universal sense, it's about treating the whole person. So.
And one of the most important goals of this upcoming Awareness Week is to highlight and shout out resources for struggling individuals. We want to ensure that anyone who needs those tools and services at least knows they exist.
Yeah, my next question is, what resources should people with eating disorder look into?
Again, when looking for professional help, finding somebody that can specialize in eating disorders, a lot of people find support groups to be beneficial just because they can know that somebody else is walking that same walk. I know for me, I always felt very alone. Like I was the only one going through this exact same thing. But once I discovered other people had the similar thoughts, similar behaviors, that helped take away a lot of the shame I was feeling about what I was doing. So I feel like there's value in support groups, whether they're led by a clinician or, what I did as a peer support group. And I even found that beneficial to my own recovery. It's a way I could give back. So I feel like it helped me just as much as it helped anybody that came. But and also too, for those that are concerned about somebody with a eating disorder, I also think it's important for them to find support too. I'm not aware of any like caregiver support groups currently, but it's also important to take care of yourself as well when you're caring for somebody with an eating disorder. But and I know there's obviously a lot of educational resources. You mentioned one, the National Eating Disorder Association. One I've always liked too is Anorexia, Nervosa, and Associated Disorders, which is aned.org. So there's a lot of professional websites out there, but yes, professional person who specializes in eating disorders, support groups if they're available, and yes, doing your research as to what different types of treatments are out there.
And to kind of retread over our earlier discussion, one of the greatest antagonists plaguing the topic of eating disorders is misconception. I think almost everyone has been misinformed about eating disorders at some point, or at the very least kind of been unaware of some of the more specific details. What misconceptions about eating disorders have you seen in your life?
I would say one of the biggest is people think of it as a diet. Which it is not. It really is a mental health condition, because what I was doing is I was programming my mind to do something that went against a natural cycle, which is eating. And the only way I could have done that is if it was something mental. So it's not just, oh, I feel fat or anything like that. You'll often hear people say those statements when they're struggling with an eating disorder, but there's something behind that. It's just a cover statement. It's not the real feeling that this person has. When I was saying, oh my gosh, I'm so fat, and obviously I could look in the mirror and say that's not true. It was me saying I'm worthless. I don't like myself. I don't want to be here anymore. So you can't look at the surface level with people with eating disorders. It's not just a simple matter of just eating. Those behaviors, they serve a purpose. It's a coping mechanism. It's a way to have control over one's life, but it's more than the behaviors. It's really what's going on inside the mind and all that negative self-talk that's going on. So again, it's more than a diet. It's really about that self-concept and self-worth and how you view yourself. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the most vital aspects of a movement like NEDA or a club like Active Minds is ensuring that the next generation sees a positive change and to consciously avoid repeating history, especially when that means potentially saving a life. We wanted to reflect on how this all started and how it could have changed. Alexis has our final wrap-up question.
As someone who has experienced this journey to recovery, what do you wish someone would have told you at the beginning of your battle with an eating disorder?
Oh, I wish there had been a lot somebody had told me. When I started noticing that my behaviors became more entrenched, I still believed I could stop whenever I wanted to. I had this false idea that I was still in control. I wish somebody had told me this would end up being a battle for my life. So I wish I had known just how dangerous it could potentially be. Again, like I said, I thought I could stop whenever I wanted. Another thing I wish somebody would have told me is that it's not going to solve anything. I looked at my eating disorder as my coping mechanism, as a way to numb out. But in reality, it didn't solve anything. It was a Band-Aid at best. Maybe it did serve as that release or that numbing out. But those issues, the trauma, everything that I was trying to bury was still there. So I was truly only harming myself. And I think maybe when it got to the recovery stage, when it got to that, I wish somebody told me that recovery would be absolutely life-changing. When I thought of recovery or going into treatment, I thought it was just the behaviors were going to change. I was still going to be me, the person that was Kelly before the eating disorder, but now I was just going to eat again. Through that whole process, I became the person I was meant to be. Granted, recovery is not linear by any means. You take 2 steps forward, you'd sometimes take 2-3 steps back, but you keep moving forward. And it takes a long time, and that I was aware of, and I knew it would take a long time. But if somebody could have told me that I could have the amazing life that I've always wanted as a result of going through the recovery process, I think it might have helped speed it up a little bit, but it is what it is. Like I said, my recovery is mine. I'm very proud of it. And I owe that recovery process so much as to where I am today. So.
Well, once again, we would like to thank you on behalf of Active Minds for meeting with us today and diving into your story for us. The reason we do events like this is to hopefully connect people with information and concepts that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And I believe that there's so much information that we have a responsibility to be aware of in a subject like this. It takes a team to get this message out, so we are extremely grateful for your time and collaboration.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you do on campus. It's absolutely amazing and much needed.
Yeah, so if our listeners are at all interested in exploring the eating disorders resources we discussed here today, they're going to be posted in the description of the podcast. And as I said up top, we're always looking for people passionate about mental health to join in for a meeting. We meet every Wednesday at 3:30 in the Columbine Room. We're on Facebook at Active Minds SCSU. We have more information on our Huskies Connect page, and we can be reached at activeminds@stcloudstate.edu.